I still remember the way the restaurant lights shimmered that night. Golden reflections dancing across wine glasses, the faint sound of violins, the smell of roses drifting through the air. It was our 10th anniversary, the night I thought we'd celebrate everything we had built together. I spent hours getting ready. The red dress he once said was his favorite, the one he bought for my birthday years ago. I even wore the perfume he said reminded him of the day we first met. For a moment, I felt like that young woman again, hopeful, in love, naive. When I walked into the restaurant, he was already there, sitting by the window, scrolling through his phone, his face lit by the glow of the screen, not by excitement or love. He looked distracted. Still, I smiled, because love does that to you. It makes you hold on, even when your hands are bleeding. He didn't even stand up to greet me, just a half smile. "Hey," he said, as if we'd just met for a quick lunch, not for something that was supposed to mean forever. I tried to keep the conversation light. I told him about my day, asked about work, even made a few jokes. But every answer was short, empty, cold. There was something in his eyes that night, something distant. And then, as the waiter poured our wine, he finally looked at me, not with love, not even with anger, but with the calm of someone who's already made a decision. "I need to tell you something," he said. My heart skipped a beat. You know those moments where time stops? Where even the sound of your heartbeat feels too loud? That was it. He took a deep breath, leaned back, and said the words that shattered everything I believed in. "I'm leaving you." Just like that. No build-up, no explanation, no warning. The sentence cut through the candlelight like a blade. I laughed at first, a small broken laugh. I thought maybe it was a joke, an anniversary prank, but his expression didn't change. I asked, "What do you mean?" And he said it again, slower this time. "I'm leaving you." It's strange how silence can be so loud. The clinking of glasses around us, the soft hum of music. It all blurred into nothing. All I could hear was that one sentence echoing in my head. He talked after that. Something about how he didn't feel the same, how things had changed, how we wanted different lives. But I couldn't process a single word. My body was still there at that table, but my heart, it was somewhere else. Maybe still clinging to the version of him that once held me like I was his whole world. I remember staring at my wedding ring, the tiny diamond reflecting the candlelight, and wondering how something so small could suddenly feel so heavy. He said he'd already packed his things. He said he'd been thinking about this for months. And I realized then, this dinner wasn't a celebration. It was a goodbye. I wanted to scream, to cry, to ask him why. But I didn't. I just sat there, still, silent, watching the man I loved unravel our story like it was nothing more than a speech he'd rehearsed. He finished talking, took a sip of his wine, looked relieved, as if a weight had been lifted off his chest, the same weight he'd just placed on mine. And then he looked at me and said, "I hope we can still be friends." Friends, that word, it hit harder than everything else. He broke my heart and then offered me friendship like a consolation prize. But I smiled, a small, calm smile, because in that moment, something inside me shifted. Something quiet, but powerful. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just said softly, "Are you sure this is what you want?" He nodded, and that's when I knew I wouldn't try to stop him. Not tonight, not ever, because he had no idea what was coming next. After that night, I couldn't sleep. The words "I'm leaving you" replayed in my head like a song I never wanted to hear again. Every silence in the house echoed with memories. The laughter that once filled our walls, the little moments we once shared. And as I sat there staring at our wedding photo, I began to realize the cracks had always been there. I just refused to see them. When we first got married, he was everything I'd ever wanted. Charming, patient, kind. He'd leave little notes on the fridge saying, "Have a good day, my love." He'd call me just to hear my voice. Even if we argued, we always made up before sleeping. Because he'd say, "I can't sleep knowing you're upset with me." Back then, I believed in forever. I believed in the way he looked at me like I was his safe place. And maybe, for a while, I really was. But forever is fragile, isn't it? It doesn't break all at once. It cracks slowly, quietly, until one day, you wake up and realize the person lying next to you is a stranger wearing the face you once loved. It started small. The good morning text stopped. The compliments faded. The "how was your day?" turned into silence over dinner. He used to ask me about my dreams, about the bakery I wanted to open one day, the recipes I scribbled in my little notebook. But slowly, he stopped listening. He'd nod while scrolling on his phone, pretending to care. I told myself he was just tired. Work stress, maybe. Everyone changes after marriage, right? That's what I kept saying, over and over, because sometimes denial feels safer than truth. Then came the secrets. Late-night calls he'd take in another room. Messages he'd quickly hide when I walked in. He'd say it was work, but his tone was too soft, too personal. And his laughter? It wasn't the same laugh he shared with me. I remember one night. I woke up at 2 a.m. for when he wasn't in bed. I found him on the balcony, phone in hand, whispering. When he saw me, he froze, then smiled and said, "Just checking an email." But no one checks emails at 2 a.m. while smiling like that. I should have confronted him. I should have asked the questions burning inside me. But I didn't, because I was scared of the answers. Instead, I told myself stories to keep the pain quiet. That he was just going through a phase. That love, real love, always finds its way back. But deep down, I knew the man I loved was slipping away, one unanswered text at a time. The distance between us wasn't measured in miles. It was measured in silence, in how he no longer reached for my hand when we crossed the street, in how his eyes no longer searched for me in a crowded room, in how his "I love you" became a routine, not a feeling. And yet I smiled. Every day I smiled, for him, for the world, for myself, because admitting something was wrong felt like tearing apart the dream I had built so carefully. I smiled when he came home late. I smiled when he forgot our plans. I smiled when I found lipstick stains that weren't mine, because lies are easier to live with when you dress them up as hope. But behind that smile, I was slowly breaking, and still I couldn't let go, because love makes fools of us all. It makes us believe that if we love harder, wait longer, forgive more, somehow they'll come back. But they never do they? Looking back now, I can see it clearly. The small, sharp cracks that formed long before the final break. The subtle signs, the fading warmth, the empty laughter. He had already left me emotionally long before he said the words aloud. And that's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't arrive suddenly. It builds slowly, disguised as routine, hidden beneath smiles, until one day, the mask falls off. That night at the anniversary dinner wasn't the beginning of my heartbreak. It was simply the ending I had been refusing to see. But here's what he didn't know. Behind every broken smile, there's a woman quietly learning how to rise again. And when she finally does, she's not the same woman he thought he could break. He had no idea that the same cracks he caused were about to become the edges of my strength. I used to believe that when love fades, you can feel it, like a slow wind leaving the room, a quiet goodbye whispered in small moments. But when betrayal enters, it doesn't whisper. It hides. Behind screens, behind smiles, behind excuses. After that night at the anniversary dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been wrong for far longer than I realized. So I started paying attention. It began with the phone. His phone, the one he never used to care about. He used to leave it lying around the house, unlocked, forgotten. But lately, it was glued to him. He'd take it even to the bathroom, sleep with it under his pillow. And every time it buzzed, I'd see that flicker of panic in his eyes, that small, sharp flash of fear. One morning, he was in the shower when it rang. I saw the name on the screen. Just an initial, A. No last name. No emoji, just... I froze. My heart started racing. Something about it felt wrong. Too simple, too clean, like someone trying too hard to stay hidden. When he came out, I asked casually, "Who's A?" He smiled. That fake, practiced smile I was starting to recognize. "Oh, just someone from work." "New client," I nodded. But something in me knew. He was lying. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling for hours, replaying every strange moment, every unexplained absence, every change in his tone. The puzzle pieces started clicking together, painfully. A few days later, I found the next clue. He left his laptop open on the kitchen table before leaving for work. Normally, I wouldn't touch his things. I respected his privacy. But that day, something drew me in. The screen was open to his emails, the cursor blinking in an empty message box. And then I saw the folder, hidden inside another, labeled innocently as work reports. I clicked it. Inside were dozens of drafts, emails that started formally but slowly turned personal. "Good morning, beautiful. I can't stop thinking about last night. I wish I was with you right now instead of in this meeting." Every line felt like a blade. And then I saw her name, Amelia. I stared at it for what felt like forever. A name so ordinary, and yet it changed everything. She wasn't a client. She was the secret behind his sudden late nights, his guarded phone, his distant eyes. My hands were shaking. I wanted to scream, to call him, to demand answers. But instead, I just sat there, numb. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was real. I took a deep breath and copied the emails to my phone. I didn't know why I did it. Maybe instinct, maybe survival. Part of me wanted proof. Part of me wanted power. That evening, I watched him walk through the door, smiling like nothing had changed. He kissed my cheek, asked about dinner, told me about his long day at work. And all I could think was, how easily you lie. I realized then that love and betrayal share one thing in common. Both make you blind, but for very different reasons. The next few days were a blur of pretending. I smiled, cooked, listened. But behind that calm face, my mind was racing. He'd started getting more careful. He'd step outside to take calls. He'd delete messages before I could see them. But he underestimated one thing. I wasn't the same woman anymore. One night while he slept, I picked up his phone. He had set a new password, something he'd never done before. But I noticed something. When he unlocked his phone earlier, his thumb moved in a pattern, 2580. I tried it. The screen unlocked. And there it was, her messages. Dozens of them, each one a dagger wrapped in fake affection. "Miss you already. When will she find out? Can't wait to be free." Free. That word made my stomach turn. He wanted to be free of me, the woman who stood by him through everything. The woman who believed in him even when he stopped believing in himself. But in that moment, I didn't cry. I didn't break down. I just sat there staring at the words, feeling a cold calm settle inside me. Because now I knew the truth. And truth is power. The next morning, I acted normal. Made breakfast. Kissed him goodbye. Watched him leave, with his phone, his lies, and his fake smile. But this time something in me had changed. I started watching patterns. Who he texted, when he disappeared, what excuses he made. The lies became predictable. Late meeting, traffic, urgent project. All rehearsed, all empty. And the more I watched, the more I realized something bigger. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was building a new life without me. A secret apartment. Joint bills with a name that wasn't mine. An entire plan already in motion. Every night I pieced it together, like a detective in my own heartbreak. I found bank statements, new credit cards, hidden keys. He thought I was too naive to notice. But he forgot I knew every version of him. Every habit, every lie, every nervous tick. He was careful, but not careful enough. And the more I uncovered, the calmer I became. Because I realized something that night, anger burns out fast. But silence? Silence can destroy. I stopped confronting him. I stopped asking questions. I just watched quietly, because now he wasn't the only one keeping secrets. For the first time in months, I smiled. Not the broken smile I'd worn before, but a real one. Because I had something he didn't, the truth. And as I stood by the window watching his car disappear into the night, I whispered to myself, You think you're in control, but you have no idea what's coming next. There's a moment in every betrayal when denial dies. It doesn't fade, it snaps. Like a thread stretched too far, one final pull and everything collapses. For me, that moment came on a rainy Thursday evening. He came home late again, smelling of cologne that wasn't his, with that same fake smile that used to fool me, but not tonight. I had already seen everything. The messages, the photos, the hotel receipts. I had even seen her, Amelia. Her social media was filled with smiles that looked too familiar. Same cafe we used to go to. Same words he once said to me, now whispered to her. And yet, when he walked in, pretending nothing was wrong, I stayed calm. Because tonight I didn't want the truth. I already had it. I wanted his reaction to it. Rough day? I asked quietly, pouring him a drink. He nodded, loosening his tie, sighing like a man burdened by the weight of the world, or maybe just the weight of his own lies. I watched him for a while, every movement, every glance, and then I said softly, I met someone today. He froze, turned slowly. Who? Amelia. The color drained from his face. For the first time, the mask slipped. I didn't need to explain, he knew. And in that silence, I saw everything. Guilt, fear, anger. A whole storm behind those eyes. But then he smiled. A cold, practiced smile. And he said, You're overreacting. She's just a friend. Don't start making up stories again. Again. That one word hit me like a slap. That's how they do it, isn't it? They make you doubt your own mind. Make you feel crazy for seeing what's right in front of you. It's called gaslighting. And I didn't even realize it until that moment. I stared at him, my voice steady. I've seen the messages. He didn't blink. Didn't even flinch. Then you're invading my privacy. I almost laughed. Privacy. That's what he called months of lies, betrayal, and deceit. He walked past me, poured himself a drink, and said casually, You're being dramatic. You've always been too emotional. That's the problem with you. Those words burned. Because for years I believed that lie. That my emotions were the problem. That if I just stayed calm, quiet, understanding, everything would be fine. But not anymore. I walked up to him, close enough to see the reflection of my own heartbreak in his eyes, and I said, You don't get to call me emotional for reacting to your betrayal. He looked away, muttering, You'll never understand. And he was right. I'd never understand how someone could fake love so perfectly. How he could look into my eyes every morning and hide a whole other life behind them. He stormed out that night, slamming the door. Said he needed space. Said I was too controlling. And I just stood there staring at the door, realizing something terrifying. He wasn't sorry. He was just caught. That night I cried like I never had before. Not because I'd lost him, but because I'd lost myself somewhere along the way. I thought back to the woman I used to be. The one who laughed freely, who believed in love, who thought loyalty meant something. Somewhere, between all his lies and half-truths, she had disappeared. But that night, through the tears, I felt something else rising inside me. Something calm. Something sharp. It wasn't rage. It wasn't hatred. It was clarity. I looked around the house. Every photo, every gift, every note he'd ever written. They weren't memories anymore. They were evidence. Proof of a life built on illusion. I started collecting them, not in anger, but in silence. Every piece went into a box. A funeral for what I used to believe. The next morning I didn't cry. I didn't text him. Didn't beg for closure. I just made coffee, got dressed, and left for work, like nothing had happened. But inside, everything had changed. He came home that evening expecting tears, expecting drama, expecting me to fall apart like before. But I didn't. He looked confused. Maybe even a little afraid. Because silence unnerves liars. They can handle confrontation, but not calmness. Calmness means control. For the first time, I had control. He tried to start an argument, but I didn't bite. He wanted guilt, emotion, reaction. I gave him none. Days passed. He kept trying to twist the story. I didn't mean to hurt you. It didn't mean anything. You're making this bigger than it is. But I'd already crossed the breaking point. There's no going back after you've seen someone's soul rot in front of you. So I stayed silent, watched, waited, and planned. Every text, every call, every lie. I documented it. Not for revenge. For freedom. Because love built on lies is a cage, and I was done living inside one. One night he asked coldly, "Are you leaving me?" I looked at him, really looked, at the man who once promised forever and delivered nothing but scars. And I said softly, "No, you already left. I'm just catching up." He didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there realizing that for the first time, his words meant nothing. Because the woman standing in front of him wasn't broken anymore. She was reborn. That was the night I finally slept peacefully. Not because everything was okay, but because I had stopped waiting for him to make it right. They say heartbreak changes you. They're wrong. It doesn't change you, it reveals you. And in my reflection, I didn't see a victim anymore. I saw someone dangerous, because she had nothing left to lose. He thought he'd destroyed me. But he had no idea. This was only the beginning. They say silence is a woman's loudest scream. But for me, silence became my weapon. After the night, he confessed nothing, explained nothing, and walked away pretending everything was normal. Something inside me switched off. No tears, no begging, no yelling, just quiet. He didn't understand it at first. He was used to my emotions, the questions, the shaking voice, the tears. He didn't know how to deal with silence. And that's what made it powerful. Because silence makes liars nervous. It gives them too much room to hear their own thoughts. And guilt echoes loud in that space. So I let him wonder. Let him think I was fine. Let him think I'd forgiven him. I smiled at breakfast. Cooked his favorite meals. Even kissed his cheek before he left for work. But inside I was rewriting the entire story. My story. You see, revenge isn't always loud. It's not screaming in the street or breaking things in anger. Real revenge is quiet. It's patient. It's watching someone destroy themselves one lie at a time. That's what I decided to do. I didn't want to expose him publicly. Not yet. I wanted him to feel what I'd felt. Confusion, fear, the slow unraveling of control. So I started with small things. The kind of things that make you question your own reality. I changed nothing obvious, just details. The coffee jar wasn't where it used to be. His car keys ended up in a different drawer. A message he swore he sent suddenly disappeared. He'd ask, "Did you move my stuff?" And I'd look at him with calm eyes and say, "No, why would I?" He'd stare for a moment, uncertain. The perfect man losing his grip. And I didn't have to lift a finger. But my real plan wasn't just to confuse him. It was to make him seen for who he really was. I'd spent years covering up his lies, protecting his image, making excuses for him. Now I was done protecting. At work, he had a reputation. Charming, responsible, a man everyone admired. No one knew the version of him I lived with, the manipulator behind the smile. But that was about to change. I started collecting proof. Emails, texts, receipts, everything he thought he'd hidden. Each piece went into a folder I labeled insurance. Not because I wanted to hurt him, but because I wanted to free myself. I remember one night sitting at my desk staring at the folder. The glow of my laptop reflected in my eyes, and for the first time, I didn't feel broken. I felt powerful. Revenge wasn't about payback anymore. It was about balance. It was about reclaiming everything he took. My peace, my trust, my voice. I started taking care of myself again. Went to the gym. Started dressing differently. Even changed my perfume. He noticed. And the more I glowed, the more paranoid he became. "Who are you seeing?" he asked one night, his tone sharp. I smiled softly and said, "No one." "Why?" He didn't answer. Just walked away, angry, insecure, and confused. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who cheated on me was now afraid I might do the same. That's what guilt does. It eats you from the inside. I'd catch him watching me sometimes, like he was trying to read my thoughts. But my face stayed unreadable. I'd mastered the art of emotional camouflage. Every morning, I'd look at him and think, "You have no idea that your downfall has already begun." Because the truth was, I'd already started pulling the strings behind the scenes. His perfect life had cracks, and I knew exactly where to push. Remember Amelia? The woman he thought was his secret? I reached out to her. Not in anger and understanding. Turns out she didn't even know about me. He had lied to her, too. Told her he was single. Told her I was the problem. When I showed her the truth, the pictures, the messages, the timeline, her face fell. She wasn't my enemy anymore. She was another casualty of his lies. And that's when I realized his world wasn't just built on betrayal. It was built on borrowed time. And I was about to end the countdown. But I didn't rush it. I kept living my life as if nothing had changed. Because revenge done right isn't about reaction. It's about timing. Every night I'd lie beside him, pretending to sleep while he stared at the ceiling, lost in thought. And I'd whisper quietly in my mind, "You have no idea what's coming." I started to plan the perfect stage, the moment he'd face the truth, publicly, painfully, and completely out of control. And the perfect opportunity came faster than I expected. Our anniversary. The same day he once humiliated me. The same day he'd announced he was leaving me. He thought I'd forgotten. He thought I'd forgiven. But what he didn't know was, I was saving everything for that night. I remember standing in front of the mirror before bed, brushing my hair, my reflection calm and steady. No tears, no tremors, just focus. That's when I realized something profound. He had taken my love for granted, but he'd underestimated my intelligence. And that mistake was going to cost him everything. Over the next few weeks, I tied up every loose end. I moved some of our shared money into a private account. I printed out every piece of proof I had, neat, dated, undeniable. And I sent a few anonymous copies to the right people. His boss, his family, his best friend. Not yet, just scheduled, to be sent automatically, the night of our anniversary dinner. He'd think it was just a celebration, but for me it was justice. When the night finally came, everything looked perfect. The restaurant, the candles, the quiet music, just like before. But this time, I wasn't the broken woman sitting across from him. I was the storm sitting in silence, smiling softly, holding every secret in my hand. He poured the wine. He smiled like nothing had happened. And I thought to myself, you're about to learn what silence can do. He had no idea that in a few hours, everything he'd built, every lie, every facade, would come crashing down. And all I had to do was speak. The night looked perfect, almost too perfect. The same restaurant where it all began. The same table by the window. The same golden lights reflecting off the wine glasses. But this time, the woman sitting there wasn't the same. I could feel the rhythm of my heartbeat in my ears, not from fear, but from control. The kind of calm that comes when you've already written the ending. He walked in, wearing that confident smile I once fell for. The one that used to make my heart race. Now it just made me feel nothing. "Happy anniversary," he said, leaning in for a kiss. I smiled, polite, almost distant. Happy anniversary. He didn't notice the difference, or maybe he chose not to. That's the thing about men like him. They never believe the quiet ones will ever fight back. He sat across from me, adjusting his cufflinks, pretending to be the gentleman he never was. "Can you believe it's been 10 years?" he said with a laugh. I looked at him, eyes steady. "Yes, 10 years of learning who you really are." He chuckled nervously, not sure if it was a joke. I didn't laugh, just took a slow sip of my wine and watched him squirm. The waiter arrived and we ordered like any normal couple. But under that table, my phone was already working. Scheduled emails, timed messages, all set to go out before dessert. To him it was a dinner. To me it was an execution served cold. As we ate, he talked about work, plans, meaningless things. I listened, nodding, pretending to care, while in my mind I counted down the minutes. He didn't know that at that very moment, his perfect life was beginning to unravel. Emails were being delivered. Proof was spreading quietly to the people who thought he could do no wrong. But I didn't rush. No, the beauty of revenge lies in its patience. I waited until he lifted his glass for another toast. To us, he said. To honesty, I replied. He froze mid-sip, his eyes flickering with unease. What's that supposed to mean? I smiled softly. Oh, nothing, just funny how truth always finds its way out. Don't you think? He put his glass down slowly. What are you talking about? I leaned in, elbows resting lightly on the table. You remember Amelia? He blinked, once, twice, then forced a laugh. Still on that? I told you, she's your coworker, right? The one you said was just a friend? I tilted my head slightly. Well, she told me a lot of interesting things. His smile vanished completely. I could see his throat tighten as he swallowed hard. The mask was slipping, and I wasn't even done yet. I'm not here to argue, I said calmly. I'm here to say thank you. He looked at me, confused. Thank you? Yes, I whispered. For teaching me what love shouldn't feel like. He tried to interrupt, but I continued. Voice steady, eyes locked on his. You spent years making me feel small. You made me believe I was too emotional, too demanding, too much. But now I see it wasn't me. It was you. You needed me broken so you could feel whole. He leaned back in his chair, his hands trembling slightly. This is ridiculous, he muttered, but his voice cracked. I smiled faintly. It's not ridiculous, darling. It's poetic, because while you were busy lying to everyone, I was busy gathering truth. His face went pale. What do you mean by that? I took out my phone, placed it on the table between us, and pressed play. His voice echoed softly through the speaker, words he had whispered to Amelia, promises, lies, plans, every sentence soaked in betrayal. The restaurant felt colder. He stared at me in shock, mouth slightly open, breath shallow. Where did you get that? From your own carelessness, I said quietly. You left your phone unlocked one night. That was enough. He reached forward, but I pulled the phone away. Don't, you've done enough damage. Silence filled the space between us. The kind of silence that feels heavy, like the world itself is holding its breath. Then, with perfect timing, his own phone buzzed on the table. Once, twice, then again. He looked down. New messages, his boss, his best friend, his sister, each one opening the proof I'd sent. Each one receiving the truth he thought would never see daylight. I didn't have to say a word. I just watched his hands tremble as he unlocked his phone, his face draining of color. What did you do? He whispered. I leaned forward, my tone almost gentle. I did what you never had the courage to do. I told the truth. His breathing grew uneven. He looked around the restaurant, like the walls were closing in. People were still laughing, eating, unaware of the storm brewing at our table. I sat there calm, almost serene, because for once he was the one losing control. You ruined me, he hissed. I shook my head slowly. No, you ruined yourself. I just turned on the lights so everyone could see. He stared at me, eyes wide, desperate, terrified. And for a second I almost felt pity. Almost. But pity is for the innocent. And he was far from that. Then suddenly his hand went to his chest. He looked pale, sweating, breathing hard. I can't, I froze. It wasn't part of the plan, not this. He tried to stand, but his legs gave out, and the glass slipped from his hand, shattering against the floor. People turned. Waiters rushed over. Someone shouted his name, and I just sat there, watching the chaos unfold. For a brief moment our eyes met. There was fear in his, not of dying, but of realizing. Realizing what he had done, what he had lost. I leaned closer, whispering in his ear as they lifted him up. I told you. The truth always finds its way out. He looked at me one last time. No words, just a silent apology that came too late. And as they carried him away, I sat back, calm, composed. Because whether he lived or not wasn't the point. The point was, he finally felt what I had felt all along, helpless, shattered, exposed. I picked up my glass, took one slow sip, and whispered under my breath. He had no idea what was coming next. The restaurant was silent, except for the faint sound of the piano in the background. He leaned back, smirking, thinking he had won. Thinking he had broken me beyond repair. But I wasn't the same woman who walked in tonight. I placed my napkin slowly on the table and looked him straight in the eye. My voice didn't tremble this time. It was calm, cold, almost soothing. "Before you go," I said softly, "you might want to check your email." He frowned, confused, reached for his phone, and in that single moment, everything changed. I watched the color drain from his face as he scrolled. The secret messages, the bank transfers, the photos, the truth he thought would never see daylight. The other woman's betrayal of him, the business partners he cheated now turning on him, all of it, sent from my account scheduled days ago. His hand began to shake. He looked up at me, eyes wide, the realization crashing down like thunder. "You did this?" he whispered. I smiled, not out of joy, but closure. "No," I said. "You did this to yourself." The fork slipped from his fingers. His breathing quickened. And then, silence. He collapsed, right there, in front of everyone. The whispers started. The waiter froze. I simply stood up, adjusted my dress, and whispered under my breath, "Happy anniversary." As I walked away, I didn't look back once. Because in that moment, I wasn't the woman he betrayed. I was the woman who ended the game. Quietly, completely. The next morning, the world was strangely quiet. Sunlight spilled through the curtains, warm, gentle, almost forgiving. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up with a knot in my chest. No anger. No tears, just silence. Peaceful silence. He was gone from my life. And with him, the weight I'd carried for so long. But what surprised me most wasn't his downfall. It was how empty revenge felt once it was done. People think revenge is loud, screaming, breaking, burning. But mine was silent. A single whisper that ended a storm. And in that silence, I found myself again. I started going for walks in the morning, just me and the sound of my footsteps. I took back the house he once filled with lies, repainting every wall with my favorite colors. Each brushstroke felt like healing. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the mirror and barely recognize her. Not the broken woman from before, but someone stronger, softer, wiser. Someone who finally stopped trying to fix a man who never wanted to be whole. And you know what I learned? Revenge wasn't about hurting him. It was about freeing me. I didn't win by making him fall. I won by standing back up. Because true power isn't in destruction, it's in walking away, calm. While everything that once hurt you collapses behind you. Sometimes, I whisper to myself, peace is the most beautiful revenge of all. The next morning, the world was strangely quiet. Sunlight spilled through the curtains, warm, gentle, almost forgiving. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up with a knot in my chest. No anger. No tears, just silence. Peaceful silence. He was gone from my life. And with him, the weight I'd carried for so long. But what surprised me most wasn't his downfall. It was how empty revenge felt once it was done. People think revenge is loud, screaming, breaking, burning. But mine was silent. A single whisper that ended a storm. And in that silence, I found myself again. I started going for walks in the morning, just me and the sound of my footsteps. I took back the house he once filled with lies, repainting every wall with my favorite colors. Each brushstroke felt like healing. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the mirror and barely recognize her. Not the broken woman from before, but someone stronger, softer, wiser. Someone who finally stopped trying to fix a man who never wanted to be whole. And you know what I learned? Revenge wasn't about hurting him. It was about freeing me. I didn't win by making him fall. I won by standing back up. Because true power isn't in destruction, it's in walking away, calm. While everything that once hurt you collapses behind you. Sometimes, I whisper to myself, peace is the most beautiful revenge of all. The next morning, the world was strangely quiet. Sunlight spilled through the curtains, warm, gentle, almost forgiving. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up with a knot in my chest. No anger. No tears, just silence. Peaceful silence. He was gone from my life. And with him, the weight I'd carried for so long. But what surprised me most wasn't his downfall. It was how empty revenge felt once it was done. People think revenge is loud, screaming, breaking, burning. But mine was silent. A single whisper that ended a storm. And in that silence, I found myself again. I started going for walks in the morning, just me and the sound of my footsteps. I took back the house he once filled with lies, repainting every wall with my favorite colors. Each brushstroke felt like healing. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the mirror and barely recognize her. Not the broken woman from before, but someone stronger, softer, wiser. Someone who finally stopped trying to fix a man who never wanted to be whole. And you know what I learned? Revenge wasn't about hurting him. It was about freeing me. I didn't win by making him fall. I won by standing back up. Because true power isn't in destruction, it's in walking away, calm. While everything that once hurt you collapses behind you. Sometimes, I whispered to myself, peace is the most beautiful revenge of all. That night wasn't the end of us. It was the beginning of me. I realized love shouldn't feel like begging to be seen. And trust, once broken, isn't meant to be glued together. It's meant to be learned from. He thought he ended my story that night. But all he did was give me a new chapter. One where I finally remembered who I was before him. Sometimes revenge isn't about making them pay. It's about making yourself free.